All right. Well, let me warmly welcome everyone from a very cold Warsaw here, both to our in person audience in the room and our virtual audience joining us online. My name is Jan Fleck. I'm the Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Europe Center, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to Warsaw, to the Warsaw programming of our flagship 2026 Central Europe Week conference. We kicked off our Central Europe Week on Monday in Bucharest, Romania. We are now thrilled to be here in Warsaw, Poland with all of you. And we're delighted and grateful to our partners in co-hosting today's discussions at Google. And thank you for the great partnership hosting us and the work together. Central Europe Week is part of our ongoing efforts at the Atlantic Council, at the Europe Center, to foster stronger relations, ties, cooperation between the United States and Central Europe, the countries of Central Europe, highlighting the critical role that the region is playing in the transatlantic alliance. Beyond our choice to bring Central Europe Week to Warsaw, today's event continues to showcase and underline the important long-term investment of the Atlantic Council in Central and Eastern Europe. We've had a presence here in Poland for over a decade. We relaunched our office in 2022 under the leadership of Aaron Koreva, and we are committed as the Council to be present and active as a trusted partner across this region and in Poland specifically. Even before we opened our offices in the region, the Council has been a strong advocate for a Europe whole, free, prosperous, and secure, none of which is possible without Poland and without Central Europe. We've long seen the potential in Poland, and I think we can all agree that Poland really has come into its own as a leader on a whole range of important pressing issues and challenges, as a leader in NATO, as a leader on defense spending in Europe and building up European defense capabilities, in confronting Russia's aggression, in supporting Ukraine, and beyond the security dimension, as a leading, dynamic, fast-growing, digitally and technologically savvy economy, invited to observe the G20 in Florida later this year, as a leader in energy security and infrastructure and so much more. And that leadership, Poland's leadership, can help also strengthen the transatlantic relationship at a time of profound change for the alliance, helping to build a rebalanced but ultimately more robust and resilient version of that relationship. And that's what we will be discussing here today in so many ways as well. So look forward to the discussions where we hope to unpack these issues and ideas. Before I turn the floor over, let me all encourage everyone to follow along our Central Europe Week programming throughout the week by visiting us on X at AC Europe or on LinkedIn or the Atlantic Council website. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And now I'm delighted to turn the floor over to my friend and colleague, the Ron Weiser family distinguished fellow at the Council, Ambassador Dan Fried, well known to everyone here in Poland. Ambassador Fried.
I was asked to discuss the strategic context in 2 minutes, so I will do so. I try to focus not on defining whatever it is the United States and Europe are going through, but where we want to be when we get past this. What's on the other side? What we're going through is what we went through in the 20th century. Democracy is challenged by aggressive tyrants. We know who we're talking about. Putin is nothing but the 21st century equivalent of our old foes from the 20th century. We know this, and no Pole needs any American to tell them what what the story is. The United States is not for the first time debating what our role should be in the world. That is an old debate. But my advice to Europeans is concentrate on where we want to be at the other side of this, which is a stronger Europe in alliance with the United States, but with a stronger voice equivalent to its stronger capabilities. That's where we want to be. It was in 1989, some poll told me that Tadeusz Mazowiecki, when facing a communist brick wall of impossibility, would focus on what's on the other side of the brick wall and on any crack in that brick wall that he could identify. And pretty soon, as we know, there was no more brick wall. There was no more Communist Party rule in Poland. Focus on the result. And you will have in the United States, and including in the Trump administration, many friends in that endeavor. We need Poland. We need Poland, a friend, an ally, strategic partner, and a country that understands learned lessons the hard way about the need for democracies to stick together. Washington is a partisan place, but it was my pleasure when I worked in the Clinton administration that one of the Republicans, in principle in opposition to the Clinton administration, was in practice one of our great allies in enlarging NATO. That was Paula Dobryansky. Later, we worked together in the Bush administration. President Clinton, President Bush were very different politically, the way they approached problems, and yet their policy toward Europe, whole, free, and at peace was identical. They both pushed NATO enlargement. Paul and I worked together, and the result was so good that it is worth defending now. Poland is a testament to the efforts of the Polish people, first and foremost, but the Americans helped. So it's a pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague of more years standing than either of us would care to admit, Paula Dobryansky. You are on.
Dan, for that introduction. Dan said for more years, he forgot. Actually, I worked in the Reagan White House National Security Council. That's when we actually first met. He was at the State Department. And I mention that because to remind, it was Reagan who, of course, delivered the speech, Evil Empire. He was very anti-communist, and that was something certainly here. Also, there was martial law in Poland, and he delivered and had the speech, light a candle in every window and let Poland be Poland. So that's where we began, Dan. Anyhow, welcome to all of you. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here for Central Europe Week. Poland looms so large, and in this case, an honor as well to have you, Minister Paweł Zalewski, who has a very distinguished background. And when I was thinking about your background, it's very fitting just to say one word on that. You're a politician, you're an historian, you're an entrepreneur, you've been in the Polish Sejm, and you've also been in the European Parliament. So the first question to you, taking it from that standpoint, is the title here is Facing a New Strategic Reality. So from Poland's perspective, what is Poland's strategic responsibility at this particular time? Please share with us, what do you see it as, and what are the challenges? There are various gaps. There's the concern about a consensus with regard to Europe. So welcome to you, and let's dive in.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dobryansky. It's an honor to be in this panel together with you. Thank you very much for invitation. It's really great to talk about crucial Central European issues with friends. And just answering your question, I have to say that with development of our economy, with development of our society, with development of our state, we adjusted to the new situation, which requires to take much more responsibility from us. As a matter of fact, I do remember, because I come from the generation which was studying in the 80s and was fighting for freedom, for independent Poland, and just engaged in politics that time. So I observed all different phases of our politics development. And I have to say that we adjusted to the situation when we are the receiver of security. So that is why we applied for the EU, for NATO membership. We believed that together with the West we'll be stronger. We always had in mind the threat from Russia, even even when the foreign affairs minister was Minister Kozyriev. We never believed that that Russia would become democratic member of international society, and unfortunately we were right. But since some years, especially since 2014, the attack of Russia against Ukraine, we understood that our role is much bigger, that we have to be also a giver of security, that our responsibility is to, first of all, for our country and for our sovereignty, for our territorial integrity, but also for the region, just for Eastern flank. And we understand that that is something absolutely crucial. Saying that, I would like to underline different elements. First, strategic alliance with the United States. That is core in our thinking about security, and observing different changes which are happening right now in Washington. Just cooperating with new administration. I have the privilege to cooperate with Pentagon very, very closely, and reading new strategies on security, on defense, waiting for other documents. But first of all, observing these strategies in practice, because they have been initiated just after this administration started working. So we believe that there is a lot of area for cooperation, for depending our alliance, and even if we observe that the United States are, let's say, practicing what they are saying. I mean, that they would like to have something what is named as burden shifting, not only burden sharing. So that still there is huge area for cooperation for us, and that Poland can in this process take a prominent role, which would be, let's say, on our benefit, because strengthening our might, I mean, strengthening our military forces, strengthening our political position is something what is needed, what we believe is positive, and that could be also the result of our alliance with the United States, in new conditions. That is first element. Second, Ukraine. we look at Ukraine not only as a state which requires support. Definitely, Ukraine requires support. We are doing it from the very beginning of the full-scale war, and we will continue. But we see Ukraine as an integrated element of European security. And that is important because when we are talking about this potential, I hope that it will happen soon, operation of the coalition of willing, it should have two aims. First, to strengthen Ukrainian sovereignty and ability to defend vis-à-vis Russia, but also to integrate huge Ukrainian potential into European security. And that is something what requires more discussion, more ideas, but definitely that is the target. Then, of course, cooperation in Baltic area, Baltic region, which some say that would be next potential target of Russian, I would say, operation. Definitely, we are facing since some years hybrid operations. So definitely they can, and we are prepared for that. They can intensify, and of course the south. I mean the Black Sea region, which is crucial for the security, and altogether in close cooperation, in close alliance with our Western European partners. So that is the architecture of security based on NATO and our strategic alliance with the US, and our role, which in this eastern flank is key, and we are aware of this responsibility here.
Minister, thank you for that robust response. A quick follow-up, and then I want to try to get in two more questions in our fireside chat. The quick question is, how are you dealing with countries in Europe that don't agree with the perspective that you just rendered? Because you very eloquently, I think, stated what are the core responsibilities, which Poland has well manifested. Are you having a big challenge with others really not seeing it the way you just described it, particularly on the point about Ukraine and what the significance of Ukraine relative to security of Europe?
Thank you, Madam, for this question. As a matter of fact, the difference come from the perception of Russia after potential hopeful ceasefire in Ukraine. So there are some who say that after the ceasefire, Russia will not create the threat for Europe. And there are others, we among them, who are aware that Russia is engaged in Ukraine not only to take Ukraine over, but also to achieve extremely important influence on Central Europe. And the condition of that is, of course, disintegration of NATO and the EU. So the main difference comes from this perception. But I would like to say that, first of all, every European states in The Hague decided to step up and increase the defense budget. So despite differences, NATO in Europe is preparing for potential conflict with Russia. So it comes, just across the differences between us. And that is very, very important. We need to strengthen our European abilities, capabilities to defend vis-à-vis Russia. And that is first point. And the second point is that even if we differ in some Russia's perception, we cooperate. We created some new formats, like, for example, E5 for ministers of defense. We, of course, complain that we are not in E3 because E3 without Poland has no the capability to represent Europe, to discuss different European perspectives. It's impossible to do it without Central Eastern European perspective, but still we are developing and depending some formats of cooperation which did not appear before the war, full-scale war in Ukraine. So we are able to cooperate despite differences.
I'm going to try, as I said, to get in just two more questions before I know your schedule's tight. So let me ask you about challenges that have been posed not only to Poland, but to Europe, to the United States, issues of disinformation during this period, issues of also, sabotaging infrastructure, all kinds of acts that have also really complicated security. And it's not only about what happens on the battlefield, but also how a country and how we collectively deal with that. And then also there are new technologies. I mean, clearly, cyber, AI. And in this case, there's the issue of innovation. Poland has been very innovative. You have, I think, been pressing on innovation, not just only from the standpoint of governmental innovation, but also private sector. So what kind of strong deterrent can we provide against aggression in these areas? If you'd say a word on that, and then I have a final question for you.
Thank you very much. With regards to innovation and new technologies, I'm absolutely sure that my colleague Michał Baranowski will continue, will develop this, and we will develop this answer during his panel. But I would like to say that it's absolutely crucial in our defense thinking to develop new technologies, to merge drones, autonomous technologies with AI, to develop different surveillance, intelligence technologies with space sector, because we need to prepare ourselves to potential war, which will last a short time. And we want to get this technology edge over Russia. And because we don't want to have this war of atrocity which is happening in Ukraine. That is absolutely crucial issue which we want to avoid. And we believe that a lot of Polish startups, thank you Google for supporting them, a lot of Polish startups, a lot of Polish firms developing AI, developing autonomous technologies, but also developing traditional but very, very, very modern technologies, war technologies, armaments, that will lead to this to the same coming, and of course cooperation uh, with the United States, with American firms, but also with Ukrainian firms who are also who are in many areas the leading firms in the world in this new war technologies. That is clear, and we will use different financial instruments like SAFE, like others, to deepen it and to deepen this cooperation and to just modernize our armed forces. Regarding hybrid war, we observe the situation, and we can say that unfortunately the scale of attacks, different kind of attacks, cyber attacks, sabotage, which could cause huge casualties, like this potential, that like this sabotage in the railway in November, and other attacks which could lead to blackout. You know, 1 day of blackout costs approximately more than $10 billion. That is the scale. They show us that, and that is a certain kind of argument in the discussion with our allies, with our friends, that Russia is not prepared for peace, is prepared for strategic pause potentially in Ukraine, but it's the logics of functioning of the state is aggressive and will be aggressive after potential ceasefire.
Minister, my last question, and then we close. You started out, and I think rightly so, and wanted to ask you about the strategic overview. And then secondly, we went into the issue of hybrid warfare and also innovation and technologies. I wanted to mention in closing a third area that, given the security challenges, that I think Poland has been very innovative, and it really stands out. And that is you're setting up in Poznan, Camp Kosciuszko, and where the Abrams tanks, you know, and General Dynamics, you have a relationship there where you're not having to pay for maintenance, training, you know, a distance. It's right here. It's readiness, it's preparedness, and it's also a deterrent. It's a show of force. So I wanted to say that and let you end on maybe a creative note. I think one of the things that Poland has been putting forward is also looking at the defense area of kinds of co-production in this case. Would you like to say some words on that? Because it seems to me this is an area that's going forward that's key and could be very groundbreaking.
Thank you very much. Defense industry is a key factor for deterrence, is a key factor for sufficient defense, and there is no need to refer to Ukrainian experience, which shows that supply chains are crucial for success on the front line. Just to shorten as much as possible this supply chains is a factor of success. We are developing our national industry, which consists of states-owned, but also very, very innovative and successful private firms. That is something new and important, and we are very happy that there is also very close cooperation between these very innovative private firms and state-owned giants, and it is extremely important for us. So first, our own technology capabilities. Then, when we decide to buy some technologies outside, like in South Korea. And by the way, we are doing it because nothing comparable is available anywhere. So sometimes our European colleagues complain, why you are buying outside Europe. I'm asking how much time when you will provide us with tanks or with spare parts for the tanks, and then the discussion stops. Unfortunately, because our intention is also to strengthen European defense sector. So if we are, for example, cooperating with South Koreans, we stress on acquiring technologies just to start construction of, for example, tanks, building tanks in Poland. So what we are doing with K2. And of course, you mentioned Poland, which is a very good example of cooperation with General Dynamics. When we buy, for example, American equipment, American armaments, you would like to have maintenance here in Poland. Also, we would like to develop it to producing spare parts. So we believe that Poland is the ideal place for development of and investments from the United States for defense industry, because first of all, Poland is the biggest buyer of American armaments, but then we have huge needs, huge demand in Ukraine and in the whole region. So if we are thinking about, but also when we are thinking about security and we are thinking about limited capabilities of American defense industry, then Poland offers very unique capabilities. So that is how we think. That is how we approach this issue, and we believe that in some years, today we are successfully developing different kind of production, but in some years we will succeed even more.
I wanted to end our conversation on that note because to me, that's the very exciting chapter going forward. It's been an honor for the Atlantic Council to continue its Central Europe Week and to be here in Poland. And we also really thank Google for enabling us to host you here today. And we value your time and your words. So please join me in thanking the Minister for this conversation. Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you.
And I'd like to invite Aaron to please come up. You will be moderating the next panel, and welcome to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Dobryansky. Thank you, Ambassador Fried. Thank you, Minister Zalewski. Thank you, Jorn, the Atlantic Council team. My name is Aaron Koreva, Director of the Atlantic Council Warsaw office. Welcome to all of you, and of course, good morning to everybody joining us from the United States. The next panel that we're gonna do will focus on economic challenges. Now, we call Central Europe Week Facing a New Strategic Reality this year, and we certainly are facing some new strategic realities, not least in the economic sector. I mean, as these geopolitical tensions, and political volatility tests the resilience of the transatlantic alliance, economic security has emerged as a key issue, both for Europe and for the United States. When you have a country like China rising, the fact that we shouldn't rely too much on our adversaries, let's put it diplomatically, has been highlighted more than ever. And this is something that Europe and the United States could help each other out simply by increasing their own mutual economic cooperation. They're natural partners for that. The trade relations between the United States and Europe is greater than any other. However, obviously, everybody, you're all here, you follow these affairs, you know very well that some shifts, let's put it that way, in the recent U.S. posture has created some uncertainty as far as the reliability is concerned. So the question we're going to try to answer with this panel is, considering the very strong economic relationship that the U.S. has with Central Europe and with countries like Poland, and the value-based relations and the security, all this reinforcing each other, What role can then Poland and other Central European countries play in order to sort of forge a transatlantic strategy to improve economic security across the Atlantic? And we have a great, fantastic panel to talk about this. I'm going to invite our speakers to come here and join me. First, His Excellency, rather, my good friend Michał Baranowski, is Secretary of State at the Ministry for Economy and Finance and Economic Development. Welcome, Michał, please. Great to see you. Second, we have Marta Pawlak, who represents AmCham. She is the legal and political counselor at the American Chamber of Commerce in Poland. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Tony Hausch, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Europe Center. Well then, let us begin. Minister, I will start with you since you represent the Polish government. So I talked a little bit about economic security, but I guess the first question would be, so from a Polish or Central European perspective, what exactly does economic security require in 2026, right? Where does the transatlantic partners sort of, where do we still diverge, and what sort of prevents the progress that we need to make?
First of all, great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Wonderful to join such a distinguished panel and be with friends. And this is very much on the record, so I will have to.
Thank you for reminding us, Minister.
Make sure that I limit a little bit my think tanker inside and be very diplomatic. But okay, but I'll try not to be too diplomatic. Okay, the question you raised is absolutely the key question of our times. The connection between what Paweł Zalewski and Ms. Dobriański have been talking about, security and defense, is now so deeply connected with geoeconomics and geopolitics, and we are seeing it really from very close up. We are in the midst of defining well both what economic security is and what tools we are using. But I would say that this is, in 9 days, European leaders will meet at something mildly called retreat on European competitiveness. And it's going to be precisely about how we define economic security, Europe's competitiveness in a moment where we have a big challenge, some opportunities coming from China, and some level of instability coming from the United States. So we have a number of tools, but again, they are the dilemmas that we face. And now it's both fun and not so much fun sometimes to face those dilemmas being on the inside, how we treat our challengers, but also our friends that are key security and strategic allies, but that approach us sometimes with serious economic threats. And we have to use our tools, and we have to address those dilemmas. I'm now being a little bit too diplomatic. Hopefully, you know what I'm talking about. Where we are balancing those two key strategic interests. We have so this topic has risen hugely to the agenda, also because it's a key tool for President Trump, for China as well. So we are going to play, we Europeans, we Poland will be playing strongly in this realm as well. We'll be using trade instruments more offensively. We'll be using foreign direct investment instruments to make sure that when countries want to invest in this very rich, plum, yummy European market of 450 million, they bring with them technology, they bring with them know-how, and they don't just put things here. together. We'll be looking very closely at what made in Europe means, what local content means. That's some of the key topics for the leaders retreat on February 12th. And in the back of all of the prime minister's mind will be, and presidents, will be how Europe finds itself in this world where rule-based system, both when it comes to security and economic cooperation, is well, no longer there when it comes to rules only. Let me stop here.
Thank you. Great way to kick us off. Slightly on a slightly different or more specific issue, I'm going to turn over to you, Marta, because we did discuss regulatory divergence a while ago. And for instance, on digital policy, we all know what I'm talking about here, and on data sustainability, competition. It's sort of become this core economic security concern. So I guess the question is, like, where does it help regulation? Where does it strengthen resilience, and where does it sort of become something that undermines it? And particularly if we can look at this from a Central European Polish perspective, or firms in Poland and Central Europe. Should be.
Now it's on. Thank you so much, Aaron, for that question and for recognizing legislation as indeed a key component of economic security. And no doubt that laws create set framework in which business operates, and especially now in times of economic uncertainty. Oh, sorry for that. We need to look at legislations through the lens of contributions that certain investors make to the Polish and European economies. And let's look at the numbers and these contributions. American investors invested in Poland $26 billion. This is the amount of indirect investment, and American assets, their contributions to the Polish economy, amount to $60 billion. There are 1,500 American companies operating in Poland, then provide Tony, help me here, 327,000 jobs that are based mostly on permanent contracts, from which, of course, social security contributions and taxes are paid to the state budget. So definitely, laws should differentiate between good investors and bad companies that also operate in our market. You know what I'm talking about. So we have investors that are physically present in Poland that contribute to our economy, employ locally here. They are also, but US investors, it's not on numbers. They brought to Poland exchange of technology, skill talents, everything that it's connected with organizational standards, with really good practices. And law should really recognize this situation. And I can give you good and bad examples of legislation that can, support US investors operating in Poland, and also, that definitely don't help them. Good example is, for instance, public procurement law, Article 16 of public procurement law, that gives free access to US investors and countries that are part of the WTO agreement on government procurement. And this provision differentiates between Chinese investors, third parties to be precise, and US investors and members of European countries, European Union. Also, the recent example, implementation of the directive regarding cybersecurity. This is a national cybersecurity law that has been passed in the Polish parliament a few years ago and hopefully will be signed by our president, that increased standards for high-risk providers. And that's very important because it guarantees that critical infrastructure in Poland is built on very modern technology. But the bad example, for instance, is STEP. That means Strategic Technology for Europe Platform. This is the program that gives money for European technology, but also excludes US investors from funding because it creates eligibility criteria that exclude companies that are owned by by US companies. It can be applied only by companies operating in the EU, European Economic Area, and Switzerland. And currently discuss digital services tax, which is a very bad example how we can really hinder operations of American investors here in Poland. The official project of DST hasn't been published yet, so it's difficult to refer, to particular provisions. But what we saw are assumptions that were published on the website of Minister of Digital Affairs, and according to them, it has really discriminatory character because by creating the threshold, it's targeted at American investors. And we heard declaration from the minister, the Prime Minister Gawkowski, and his team that it's not against US investors, but the target is rather here Chinese e-commerce. But at the end of the day, the provision we're expecting to see probably will make not any difference and won't differentiate from US and Chinese investors. And it creates really a textbook case of discriminatory law according to the bilateral investment treaty. So I can talk more about it, but definitely we need to take this into consideration. Don't forget that all these countries that have DST in force, like France, Italy, Austria, and Spain, they are not party of bilateral investment treaties that Poland signed in 1990. So that's really important in dialogue with US administration also.
Thank you.
I did my best to be diplomatic.
No, but that's good. I think the point was made clearly. I hope, yes, we will. Well, hopefully we'll have the time to develop that as well. Tony, we also talked over to you before Christmas, if I remember this correctly. Was it before Christmas? Obviously, one's mind is on maybe on other things, but we discussed that Central Europe is often framed as this kind of manufacturing hub. There's innovation, there's logistics corridor, and all that, but how can we sort of move this region from being beneficial to transatlantic supply chains to rather becoming sort of a strategic pillar within them, and particularly in areas that are critical to competitiveness and resistance and resilience? I mean, sort of when we talked, it was kind of a little bit like, okay, so there are certain things we can't make in America anymore, right? But we can make it here, and the question, I guess, is how would that work?
Well, I think the big challenge that we face right now is reality has already overtaken perception. Central Europe is more than just a production hub. Whether you're looking at high-tech manufacturing, whether you're looking at agricultural production, but also if you're looking at software, innovation, global shared services, all these sort of things, I think the reality in Central Europe exceeds what most people in a lot of European markets, as well as in the US, actually perceive. And that's a very common thing. Very often reality is outpacing perception by some years. Just as in the late 90s, early 2000s, just before pre-accession to the European Union, I think some Americans got off the airplane here and they were surprised the country was not in black and white, because that's what they used to see on the newsreels from martial law. And so this is a challenge not only for policymakers, but it's also a challenge for business leaders internally to communicate that there is a bigger and better role that can be played here in Central Europe by a lot of companies. But I think the other thing that's starting to shift that dynamic a little bit, is the fact that two things. One, we have limits to our production, particularly in some of the military industrial base in the US, and indeed should be looking at broader cooperation throughout the region to fill those shortcomings, not only for our NATO allies, but also for US needs as well. But I think the second thing that's really starting to shift the dynamic is, as we see the emergence of companies out of Central Europe in technology sectors, in health science, in energy, that are moving outside of their national borders, in some cases becoming players on a global scale. And I think this is something that policymakers, and I know His Excellency has no problem with this, but more of our policymakers need to communicate that to our partners across the Atlantic and throughout Europe, that we have capabilities, we have champions, and we're more than a manufacturing hub, we're more than a logistics hub. And I think that this is also part of the, need economic policy, but you also need good advertising. And Central Europe, Poland as well, need to advertise better the success story and what we're capable of doing in this region, because that plays to the enhanced security economically and national security for Central Europe, but it also strengthens the transatlantic alliance. If we are perceived as a stronger, more capable partner that actually matches the reality, that's better, I think, also for the relationship and how we communicate back and forth across the water.
Thanks. I'm too young to remember communism. I remember the early '90s, but if somebody would have told me that this country is going to be in the G20, at this point, and again the standard of living, would rise so high in such a short time. That really is amazing. It was not guaranteed, but it was hard work of the Polish people, for which they should be very proud. Focusing a little bit more on Poland, but sort of tying to a little bit what you said, Tony. Back to you, Minister Barnowski. Again, we've seen this amazing growth. Poland's been sort of a leader in the EU in this. What is it, 3.5% this year? So, okay, there you go. And of course, there's a great return on investment. So when we relaunched the Office of the Atlantic Council here 3.5 years ago, obviously we were talking a lot about Ukraine and how Poland become the center of gravity in terms of security. Traditional security in Europe. So I guess what can Poland then do to improve European economic security and resilience, considering it's such a booming, successful economy? Or what should it do? Or more like maybe it shouldn't do anything. Maybe it's it's something else, right? But just to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, and it is 3.6 for last year. So and it's going to be even more this coming year. And it is, as much as I would love for my ministry to take full credit for it, I think it is the entrepreneurial spirit of Polish people that is largely and very good reforms of many governments that is responsible for it. There are a few things that we are doing and we need to be doing. One is, of course, we are contributing to the overall growth of Europe. Easy. We'll continue doing this. The huge push that we are having within the EU that Prime Minister Tusk is championing and the whole administration is focusing on deregulation rather than more of cumbersome regulation. This was a priority during our presidency of the European Council, and it continues to be not only our, but really EU's priority. And you can see this also in the run-up to this leaders' retreat that I mentioned. We are so deregulation, simplification. We call it deregulation. Secondly, is certainly looking for diversifying of our trade partners and economic partners. I'll give you a couple examples. Later this week, Minister Domański, myself are taking certainly the biggest delegation ever to Saudi Arabia, probably one of the biggest delegations of diplomatic economic diplomacy ever, to really open up new markets. We are also very active player in EU's trade policy. There are some economic FTAs that we like, free trade agreements that we like more than others. We will like India a little bit more than we like Mercosur. We need to make sure they are well balanced also when it comes to all of our sectors. But Poland is pushing very strongly. And thirdly, and that's something it connects also, it's clear that Poland has grown so fast, right, over not only the last couple years, but if we look at the last 35 years, I'm sure everyone here knows that Poland is only number 2 second fastest growing country in the world, right after China. Not South Korea, not United States, but Poland has the fastest growth. We have only 2 quarters that were not there with growth. But we need a new model of growth based on innovation. And that's what we are doing, and that connects with what Tony has been saying about opening up and promoting. So late last year, I opened the office of a Polish trade and investment agency in Silicon Valley, building relationships there. We have very active economic diplomacy, and G20 is another way that we are promoting Poland more globally, and this is with very good cooperation with US and US administration, that Poland not only will take part in the summit of G20, but we are part of all the working groups and really became part of the fabric of G20. So these are some of the things that we are in the midst of doing already.
Right. I guess just thought about it just now for some reason. Martha, back to, over to you. And you know, feel free if you want to develop more on what you said in the beginning. But it's also an additional question there. I mean, the American Chamber of Commerce, obviously, you know, AmCham, it's selling great, you know, American firms coming here, selling great American stuff, but it's also selling America in a way, right? You could almost say that if you don't mind me being so bold.
Now we are selling American business for
right?
sure.
Okay, but you know, obviously, as you know, we all know what the elephant in the room here is. You know, some shift in U.S. political posture have introduced a certain level of uncertainty. I mean, that's just the way it is. We can debate whether, you know, it's good, it's sensible or not, but be that as it may, it's there. So what would you say to governments in Central European countries, including Poland? How should they react to something like this? I mean, should they hedge against this political volatility in the United States, and how to do that without undermining the transatlantic relationship itself? Nice, easy one, but
well, that's a tough one, and I didn't want to talk about geopolitics, but okay. I think that definitely we should cooperate together. I mean, as Minister Baranowski said, Poland should play a role as coordinator in the region. It's the best way to, you know, to have more influence. And I'm going to quote someone from yesterday party we attended, that Poland is an answer to all European problems. Well, I think that definitely Poland should set a good example, and I will get back to legislation again, because introducing something like DST definitely is not a good example, and maybe we could wait with that till OECD reform, or AmCham is very eager to be at the table and discuss this tax reform globally, for sure. But definitely there is no other alternative that European transatlantic alliance, and I think we should look at this through business perspective, operating in our countries. So really building, because as you said, we can observe political volatility, but business remains stable. You know, these numbers I gave you a few minutes ago, they are growing. US investors are present in Poland. I'm giving this Polish example because that's what we are familiar with. They are present in Poland since the economic transformation. They brought to Poland skills, transfer of skills, exchange of technology, and you know, we shouldn't judge the best friend, you know, during their worst moments. So definitely, answering to your question, we should create here in Poland and in other European countries more, I don't want to say regulations again, but more favorable investment ecosystem, you know, to let investors who are true friends to develop more and to reinvest in these countries.
okay. Let's see if this comes out, if this question sounds right to you, Tony. Obviously, both Washington and Brussels have sort of embraced a policy of industrialization, right, or industrial policy rather, but they have different tools and different timelines. Do you think that the transatlantic community is converging sort of on a shared approach, or is it like towards more like competition, subsidy competition? And if if that's a bad thing, is there a role that Central Europe and Central European countries can play in order to create a more coherent framework? To the extent that we need a more coherent framework, maybe we don't, but I don't. Just from your vantage point, what do you think?
Well, the transatlantic community is paying the price of outsourcing and going cheap for decades. We have in Europe, and to a much greater extent in the US, given away or outsourced a lot of our industrial capability. That means we have a rebuild that has to go on. And I think you were seeing the administration in Washington, and you're seeing Brussels and various national governments look at ways, how do we nearshore? How do we boost our resiliency and our redundancy for not just national security needs, but for our local industries, to make sure that we are able to better take care of things in pharmaceuticals, in agricultural production, fertilizers, you name it. I think, but first COVID, and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine, plus tensions around the world, show that we have a lot more fragile economic system than many of us would have liked to have believed just a few years ago. So I think it's inevitable there will be some tension between one side of the Atlantic and the other as they kind of try to do this. But the fact of the matter is there's a massive amount of reinvestment needed, a massive amount of innovative production and capability to be deployed, and there will be issues. But I think that shouldn't distract from the fact that both Europe and the US need to revamp their economic model of production. They need to nearshore. We need to be able to make sure that we produce at least enough of critical materials and items, and that we are not relying on container ships from the other side of the world to bring critical issues. And of course, we're not advocating, in my view, diminishing global trade, but just making sure that you have a baseline capability at the very least, and then let those companies and markets that can do things well compete economically. But I think this is something that we will have to see, how that shapes out. But I think the other key area too, that not just in production and manufacturing is, I was a little disappointed to see a commissioner from the EU say, "Oh, we've traded dependence on Russian gas for American gas." Well, certainly the gas has got to come from somewhere if you're not going to take Russian gas. But I think the fact of the matter is long-term contracts with American companies mean they're legally obligated. Their shareholders expect them to meet their obligations. The markets expect them to meet their obligations. And they won't turn off the tap just to make a point, as our neighbor to the east had done on multiple times. So I think that on a number of areas, we need to think about what is the effect, and as was mentioned before, I think by Ambassador Fried, where do we want to go? What is the end game here? And if the end game is to transition our economies to more effective, better production, to bring innovation in, to keep transatlantic ties, we need to step away a little bit from the day-to-day, he said, she said, they're doing this, they're doing that, and think about how do we enhance the national security and the economic security of the transatlantic region, and in particular here in Central Europe, which I think has a very important role to play. And in a way, Central Europe has a role to play in, frankly, demonstrating to some of our neighbors to the west how you can do things and do things better and more effectively. And this is something that I think that the new, if you will, 35-year now, but new European economies have definitely shown that flexibility, a certain amount of agility, and marrying that with innovation and appetite is a key to success. I think we just need to keep going down that road.
Sounds like a solid plan. We have some questions from the audience here that just came in, and so I'm going to read it. And this is a question for, I think it's directed towards you, Minister Baranowski, but of course, feel free to jump in if you want to. You talked about deregulation as a priority. Of course, we hear that often, right? But So basically, in what industries does Poland believe, or the Polish government believe, that we should have fewer regulations? And is it politically feasible, given the domestic situation and the differing perspective across the EU on the necessity of regulations to have uniform compliance? Is there a tension there? And how does Poland handle that?
Okay, so we actually, I think it's hard for me to point to a sector where we don't want less regulation, both as Poland and really this is no longer some difficult debate in Brussels among the member states. It is difficult debate to some extent how you do it, and also making sure that our colleagues in the European Parliament, Commission, in the whole, in all the institutions, fully embrace this. But it's the mood is pretty radical. You're probably familiar with all the omnibuses, simplifications that will keep coming. That will keep going. There'll be one in chemical industry. There'll be one in energy. We also need to make sure that we slow down the pace of regulation, and that also when European law is passed, that then the implementation at the member state level is not exaggerated, sort of gold plating. But I can confirm with you, when we sit at fascinating meetings of 3 hours or more and look at each and every regulation, all of our ministers and deputy ministers are fully focused on whether there is any gold plating going on. So that's a really big focus. Now, so that the challenge is actually delivering in the details on this one, and changing the machinery from producing more rules to either taking rules down or sharpening the way that we harmonize and open up the superpower of ours, which is the single market. Single market that still has huge barriers, right? Barriers that in services is over 110% between Europeans, and in goods is 40%. So, but we are on the way there, and interestingly, others are doing this too. I did not know, I must say, until sometime last year, that Canada, between states, have barriers, and they are opening their markets. They are deregulating. So that's very much the direction here. And actually, I'm not seeing any of this as a problem within Poland either. We do not have some spirited partisan debates on wanting to regulate more.
No, that's good news. One wasn't always that way, but if it's that way, then that's
true. I'm not saying it's always. My memory of inside the government started not so long ago, and that was definitely the leitmotif of the presidency, and it certainly continues.
Okay. I just, something that just came to my mind, because last time you talked a lot about the Mercosur agreement a while ago. I remember on a different event we did, and I just thought about it because I think I read somewhere that, like, again, everybody talks about beef and the farmers, and we had some protests here in Poland and probably in other countries as well. But really, this agreement, it's a lot about, again, securing these critical materials for Europe, right? You got some copper, lithium, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is part of economic resilience, right? So I'm wondering, it's like, how do you make? I mean, sure, it's past, I suppose, but I mean, how do we make stuff like that popular then among people, so that we, so it doesn't have to take how long did it take?
This one took 20 years,
20
but
years.
this was not, that was not the main objective. I mean, critical raw materials is absolutely a very, very important aspect of it. And actually, today in Washington, there is a meeting that includes a number of European ministers, including Deputy Prime Minister Sikorski, and European Commission that is representing EU as a whole, to talk with the US about deal and thinking together on critical raw materials. And here it's China who put this big gun of dependencies and weaponization of dependencies very firmly in October of last year. And we are frankly reacting about a decade too late to this, everyone, Americans, Europeans, and others. And we'll have this in other agreements as well. There is an element of this in Mercosur, but it's not a particularly vital one. We'll be cooperating very closely with other like-minded, with the Australians, with Japanese that have been doing this for a while, with Americans as well. And we do need to be doing this mainly at an EU level, because that's when we have the real leverage, and that's where you also don't introduce distortions to the single market.
Yes. Of course, I mean there's no single country in Europe whose economy is bigger than China's, obviously, but the entire European Union put together is bigger than the Chinese economy. Also, you throw America into the mix, and all of a sudden, that's
yes. Well, and here it takes two to tango, right?
Indeed. Would anyone? No, I give a lot of time to Minister Baranowski. Would any of the other panelists, Marta, Tony, you want to jump in on the whole two to tango aspect? Because that's sort of what we're all about here.
Well, you also want the best dancing is usually when people have similar skill sets. For instance, I deteriorate the pleasure of anyone dancing when I dance with them because I'm not good at it. But I think to the minister's point, unlocking the single market further and that finishing that experiment is absolutely critical, because a stronger Europe is a better partner for the US. It has more bargaining power with the US, but it also adds increasing weight in this geopolitical world. Everyone talks about the Draghi report over the last few years. Great, fine. The Leto report, in my view, is more important because it's about finishing the single market experiment. We don't have a single market in energy. We don't truly have a single market in financial services. Yes, we have cross-border banking and insurance policies and blah, blah, blah. But what we haven't done as Europe is figure out how to unlock in a productive way some of the 33 trillion euro in pension savings. When we say we don't have money for defense modernization, or we don't have money for anything, we've got money. It's often locked up in inefficient tools, and
or it's going to the U.S.
Or, well, it could, some of that, but as long as more of it went to me, I would be okay. No, but I think that in Europe we have to. I'm not saying that take risks, but I think we need to be more productive with the tools that we have in the European space. And some of that, it doesn't mean unleash 33 trillion and turn it loose, but there must be ways to utilize some of that in productive ways to help us meet our defense, security, education, to face our technology challenges that we have because of the demographic cliffs. So these are all, we have assets. We just need to do better. And the way to do that, in my view, and it sounds very simplistic, but is to further enhance the vitality and the depth and breadth of the single market.
Yes, of course.
Tony said about tools we have in our hands. Definitely, we have assets coming from U.S. investors, and we should think about building cooperation using that. This is the answer. Definitely not protectionism from Europe.
Or no protectionism from the U.S. either, right? Hopefully, as I say, the two to tango. On good and bad dancers, there's no mistake in the tango, though, Tony. It's a lot like life, actually. I guess what's sort of then, what would be a nightmare scenario then from the point of view of economic resilience, from a transatlantic point of view? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I don't know. Like, do you see any storm clouds on the horizon beyond the ones that were already addressed? Something that could go like really, really. I don't know if it's not a nice thing to end on. We don't have to end yet, but is there something that worries you, I guess? Or is there something that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about when it comes to economic resilience and economic security these days?
I think in a multipolar world right now with a lot of regional tensions and various things going on, the biggest, I think, thing that I know for some of the investors I work with that keeps on their mind is for somebody to miscalculate something. And we talk about scenarios, but that's not likely to happen. But, things can tip in certain areas. And I think that we are still in a very much a new transition period, post-COVID, different types of supply chains, different sorts of issues, different sorts of tensions about where does our energy come from, who's controlling AI, who's going to, develop, where will the people come from to help our economies grow, how will we manage these human assets. So I think that there's a lot of things that both business managers but also policymakers are having to juggle, if you will, kind of a new set of eggs in the basket. That the old rules are kind of still in people's minds, but we have a lot of new things that are on the plate. And I think the other thing too comes down to that I would just mention that when we talk about innovation, we talk about energy, we talk about AI and data centers and all these things. That's all great, but it only comes down to really one thing: energy and energy security. If you don't have energy and energy security, you will not benefit and be a leader in these new emerging areas. So I think, again, it comes back to not so much storm clouds, but thinking, where do we want to get to and how do we take the steps to get there? And I think if we're not planning on a European scale or an American scale or a transatlantic scale about how we get there, then other actors are going to make our life more difficult.
Well, yeah, and if you don't have energy security, it's one of those things that makes ordinary people really upset. If you don't have your citizens, right? But if you don't have energy security or no, what's the word, predictability there. I think we did get another audience question actually, and this one was, I think, also to you, Tony, because it's just you. Unless you wanted to jump in, Minister.
I do for a second.
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't want to be. I was smiling because I have lots of nightmares, lots of scenarios that can be nightmarish. The tricky thing is that sometimes we get very close to them. So, a couple things that I would like for us to focus on. One, and again, being very polite, we do need predictability also in our economic relationship. We have a deal. The deal is now stuck. It's stuck in the European Parliament, but it is because of the threats that were there put forward. So we need that. I think we need to make sure that when we have political disagreements, they don't get mixed with economic pressure points, because this will create a really dynamics that will bring these economic tools to the forefront. And thirdly, look, we have common challengers, and we are not working on this together. There is so much more that we could do together. And I, right now I have the privilege to be sitting in rooms when we put those ideas forward at the pretty high levels, and there could be more openness to really do this together, and we are not. So these are a couple concrete things that would turn these stormy clouds that are hanging not too far into beautiful, shiny, sunny weather.
Well, looking forward to that. I guess going back to the audience question, because I thought it was good. It's nice, easy, and direct one for you, Tony. So it's just, you mentioned Draghi and Letta reports. Okay, great, but the proposals there are going nowhere, according to the audience question that we got. So what do we do to revitalize them? Can we revitalize them? Or maybe they are going somewhere. I don't.
Well, first, if Minister Baranovsky would simply work harder, then these things would progress. But you're right, things move slowly, things move glacially. But the first thing that has to happen is, as we hear, there's a consensus about we can't overregulate, we can't gold plate when we're doing national implementation. The fact that in a lot of the places I go around Europe, that people are actually discussing the Leto report talking about competition in the Draghi report, recognizing that that literally was a non-existent conversation 5 years ago or pre-COVID. So yes, things move slowly, but the fact that these conversations are taking place, I think, is building a consensus that things need to happen. Now, in a perfect world, and certainly from a business and investor point of view, we'd like these things to happen a lot faster. I mean, I have clients who, still in Poland, Romania, Czechia, where they're still trying to figure out why they're waiting 6 months to get an official reply. That's not the way you build your economy. That's not the way you build investor confidence. And those are just tiny little issues. But when you're looking at the big reform, the ability to have more elastic labor markets, the fact that work hours in some sectors are shrinking, but the productivity is not necessarily going up. So you can put in more labor protections, but if you don't increase productivity, you have a net decrease in economic value. So these are the things that we have to do better, certainly in Europe. But I think to the minister's point as well is I believe from the meetings I'm back and forth to in Washington, there is an enormous amount of untapped cooperative potential to solve some basic problems. We're not going to solve everything, but there's a lot of things that remind me of the discussions about the transatlantic trade and investment treaty, where there was a whole bunch of stuff agreed that would benefit everybody. But when it failed, it failed. Why don't we at least do some of those and get those things done? Take low-hanging fruit, do things that you can fix, and then keep pounding away.
Couldn't agree more. It's one of the I don't know if everybody on the panel agrees with me, but it was a while since we've done such a strategic mistake as tank the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. But that's a topic for another day. We did get another audience question. I'm going to read this. It's not saying who's directed to, but I thought it was very good. So if the US wants a stronger Europe, that obviously includes, we're sort of bumping up towards the end here, so whoever wants to take this, that includes the defense industry. And as far as Poland, they spend a lot on defense, but the defense industry kind of lags behind. How can we then get the United States to see that Poland has so much latent defense industry potential, but US defense industry is not incentivized to partner with Polish defense industry, at least not like South Korea does? So how does the US and Polish government change this dynamic? This is sort of a little bit of what the Minister Zalewski was touched on this, and we kind of touched on that too, on the interoperability. I mean, the pillar in the transatlantic economic relation. Who would like to grab that one? I mean, there's a little bit of questions for government, so I guess Minister Barnowski naturally.
But Tony, and I mean, we should all answer because there is also perspective from your experience in the U.S. defense industry. I can tell you from our perspective. We are about to actually, in the Ministry of Economic Development and Technology, put forward the strategy for the development of defense industry, done of course in cooperation with the Ministry of State Assets and MOD. One of the, and we have robust conversations also about it with the US administration. So we push very strong and with openness, but work remains to be done, is to create as many joint ventures as we can with American and European firms as well, because we will be spending a lot on defense, and we want to make sure that we get both the critical capabilities that are important for our defense, but also that we get an engine of economic growth. And that eventually this can lead to an export-driven defense industry. So some of that, and Tony can comment on this more, is to make sure that American defense companies are open to and are able to share technology with Polish companies, and we need to make sure that we can get there. Again, this will be a booming market, and this, I mean, both Poland, but also Europe writ large, and that's why the American companies need to become a little bit more European and preferably a little bit more Polish to take a good advantage of the money that will be limited to real players that have a European footprint. That's just going to be the case. We haven't used the sovereignty word just yet, but this is definitely in the back of many people's minds. So ability to share technology and co-produce. And I know that some companies are more advanced in this than others. Thanks.
Great point. And anyone on the other panelists will be, I think it's important.
I'll just jump in and then Marta can correct me. I think though that defense is a particular issue. I think also innovative thinking is a little bit behind the curve in the defense sector traditionally as a conservative industry. But I think one of the challenges too is the way the U.S. sells equipment, high-tech equipment to our allies through foreign military sales. Then you're buying from the U.S. government. So I know from having worked in the industry that if you couldn't get something cleared for direct commercial sale and you have to go through FMS, it takes more time. There's an enormous amount of restrictions. Just the whole negotiation process takes forever. Then you end up having unhappy U.S. shareholders, unhappy potential clients, is because you're keep watching. Usually delays happen in terms of that. Plus, we have our supply chain and production issues for a lot of this very expensive high-tech equipment in some areas, not in all, but in some. So I think that if we want to, we may not be able to fix the FMS system, but I think where possible in some areas, Poland and other Central European countries should limit FMS to those places where it's absolutely needed and try to do more business-to-business direct commercial sale. Now, that doesn't mean that certain things are going to be freely available, but in my view, too much stuff goes through official gov-to-gov channels, and it slows it down. It makes it more expensive. It makes that, in some cases, technology is less likely to be shared or outsourcing. But the other thing that will provide opportunity in Poland, and including for a much broader range of U.S. companies, I think it's inevitable that Poland and other NATO countries in Central Europe will have to rely more on private sector companies, on maintenance, support, infrastructure, things. We can't afford to have too many cooks and dishwashers in uniform. We need combatants and technicians, and there's a lot bigger role, I think, that will have to be played by the private sector to support national security initiatives in Poland.
And on that note, I think that's a great point. That is all we have time for. Please join me in thanking our great panel, Minister Baranowski, Marta Pawlak, and Tony Hausch. Big round of applause. And be sure to follow Central Europe Week. We've been doing Central Europe Week for 7 years. We do this because Central Europe matters. Central Europe is dynamic. It's important to the transatlantic partnership, and it has the spirit, I think, that is necessary to revitalize and sort of help us create a revitalized transatlantic partnership, because we need it. The world needs it, quite frankly, I believe. So thank you so much, and keep following Central Europe Week and the Atlantic Council in Warsaw. Thank you for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Tony, thank you. Always good to see you.